Before we get into the subjects, yes, 2 subjects today. Firstly, new video on the Moistonia live channel, and I'm streaming there tonight at 9:30 PM with Trups political recap. Probably going to cover the yellow hammer, yellow jacket, yellow hammer documents. Second, there will not be a reading on the Moistonia Reads channel tonight because it's far too long. I'm going to have it done for next Friday instead. Now, the first subject I want to cover involves a lady called Lynn Stoker. Lynn Stoker from Northumberland was jailed for 21 weeks and fined £50,000. The fine seems graver than the prison sentence, which she'll probably only serve 3 to 4 weeks of anyway. What do you suppose her crime was? Well, I'll tell you. Like I was going to let you work it out anyway. Simply, she had a few dogs. Okay, by a few, I mean more than 100. Basically, she's been banned from keeping or breeding animals for 15 years. At her age of 62, she'll never have a pet again realistically. She left them in her what many consider a squalid home, video on the screen now for you to admire. Many crammed into tiny cages suffering from diseases and fractures. Barely any fresh water, and with many in such a bad state they had to be put down. She was found guilty of 16 charges of cruelty and neglect after RSPCA investigators discovered her house was full of animals in those shocking conditions. What she was a breeder, but struggled to sell them and ended up with a house full of animals because she didn't know how to stop. In a somewhat peculiar way, she had asked for help, but then began acting aggressively towards that very mentioned help. So a search warrant was issued in May of 2018 and all the animals were seized. During that trial, the court heard how 2 dogs had fractured jaws, many had disease symptoms, and the majority of them kept in very much crowded cages. Many of the dogs had not been to the vet for any level of treatment in years, were at such an advanced stage of suffering because of her neglect. Stoker had refused to cooperate with the RSPCA, who had offered her help after she requested it. She believed that the RSPCA were stoking up some kind of conspiracy to remove the dogs in order to make profit for themselves. Her defending solicitor said that it's fair to say circumstances had got beyond my client's control. Right. 21 weeks and £50,000, so essentially you're going to have to sell your house, I think. Unless you don't own it, in which case sell all your stuff. 21 weeks in prison for what you did. I have stood by a very consistent belief in parity of esteem when it comes to animal abuse and human abuse. Now, people might disagree with me on this. That's fine. As far as I am concerned, the level of suffering they endured should be a graver sentence. I will always believe that. I have no time for animal abusers. You, Stoker, should stay there for the 21 weeks. But I'd like to change the week to year, since many had to be put down because of the level of suffering they endured because of your recklessness. It is nothing more than you deserve. During the sentencing, District Judge Bernard Begley said, "The report I've read shows a repetition of the assertions made by you during the trial of a lack of any fault, the conspiracy of others, and somewhat predictably, not a shred of remorse. I can't find any redeeming features in your case." Now, she did deny 11 charges of causing unnecessary suffering to a protected animal, 4 counts of failing to ensure an animal's welfare needs were met, and 1 application for animals to be given to the RSPCA. The initial application from the RSPCA for her to pay back to them for everything they had to do was £290,000, but the judge has only ordered £50,000. Hopefully they could take that to an appeal court and perhaps get that raised. If she has any money, she doesn't deserve it now. I don't care what people think on that one. I do care what you think, whether you disagree with my view about animal abusers, but my view is going to be consistent. Now on to another subject that I didn't know about until a few moments ago. Tommy Robinson is free. He was sentenced to 19 weeks in prison. He has served 9 of them, and he didn't see a single prisoner in the process. He was released from HMP Belmarsh today, emerging with a beard and haircut and declaring, "First stop, hairdressers." Now, he was jailed initially in July, after he was done for live streaming a video of defendants in a trial where some had been seen going into the court. Many have rightly pointed out he shouldn't have gone to prison for it. Some saying also, rightly, he should have gone to prison for it. What I've noticed from the argumentation on this is that it is resoundingly a semantics-based argument. as to whether or not it interfered with the case, the progression of the case, what stage the case was at, and so on. Others pointing out that it should never have gone to trial because they mucked up the first one and double jeopardy, but we don't have double jeopardy in the United Kingdom. Ish. We do and don't. It's selective. With cases like Stephen Lawrence, his murder is very much well known. The police couldn't recharge people on the same murder charge, having to get quite creative on it. I will give him some credit. In the speech he gave just leaving prison to the few reporters that turned up, he did say have fun with the memes, now that he looks like a ginger cowardly convert. Credit to him on that. He did confirm that he did not see another prisoner for his own safety. He also indicated the vast amount of mail he gets, which confirms the amount of support he receives from those that agree with what he says. Some argued that what he was doing was a free speech thing and therefore it was an attack on free speech. You can all say that. I'm merely saying that it was said. I will not be drawn in on it. Many of his supporters have rallied to his favour and said that this was an absolute embarrassment against the government. And I tend to think there is some validity to it because they've given him fuel to a fire. They have made him a martyr repeatedly. Every article done on him says, the founder of the EDL. The founder of the EDL. The founder of the EDL. No one cares about the EDL. Are they still a thing? What people say and what others pigeonhole you as. That's the problem. If you can debunk how they are not something, do it. That is better. If you can defeat them word for word, even better. If you ignore their existence, though, or use some kind of bias to push through things through an abuse of power, perhaps, you make them a martyr. You've seen the rallies that Tommy Robinson, can get. He can get tens of thousands to rally to his name and what he says. Maybe even hundreds of thousands, if you stoke that fire just enough. Right now, many say he is the champion of free speech. How embarrassing is that? That those that claim to want to protect free speech, who are in positions of power themselves, are being trumped by a guy who is willing to say the very things they are too afraid to say. As far as his sentence goes, I do tend to think it was wrong. They mucked up the case. It should have been swept under the rug. Even in the courtroom, they conceded that. They mucked it up. They shouldn't get a second try at it. If what he did had interfered with a case where millions were spent, he should have been fined. Then. But they screwed up then. He shouldn't have been done for another time for contempt, especially after the first one was an absolute farce. I am with this case quite interested to know what you all think. I do think the arguments about him being convicted of journalism are what many of you could say are highly debatable. And I think it is right people debate it, because then people can hash out those agreements and disagreements on this particular subject. I remember this case quite clearly. I think we all do. He should never have been sent to prison the second time because they screwed it up. The first time there was some argument to it, but they rushed it, so they ruined it. And that was a big mistake. He should have been given an apology for that, by the way. It will be very interesting to see what Tommy does now, because he is still a very, very polarizing character that can incite quite a lot of backlash. This will make him stronger, and it is all your own doing, because not one of you could beat him on ideas. How embarrassing is that? That's pretty tragic, actually. Anyway, with the animal abuser and with Tommy Robinson, I'm very keen to know what you think, so please let me know down below. I do read everything, I promise you I do, and I do find this quite fascinating.